Senator, what is this debate between you and Senator Cruz about on immigration?
Well, Ted was open and in fact was a supporter of legalizing people that were in this country illegally. He was during the debate on the Senate bill, and he was after the debate on the Senate bill. He made it clear on multiple occasions that he was against citizenship, but he was open to legalization. And then for weeks now on the campaign trail, he's refused to answer that question until the other night at the debate when he said that he did not intend to legalize people, again, trying to find himself some wiggle room. And so the bottom line is that there isn't that big a difference between him and I on how to approach immigration. And that was the point I was trying to make. This is a serious issue and it needs to be confronted, and every Republican running for president has supported or supports legalization in some form or fashion of people that are in this country illegally. Even Donald Trump, he just wants to make them leave the country first and then he'll legalize them. So the bottom line is we need to find a solution to an issue that has confronted our country for 30 years. But we need to be fair and accurate about where we all stand on it and how we would all move forward.
Is it about immigration, or are you making a larger charge about Ted Cruz and whether he's being honest and truthful with people?
Well, I think Ted wanted to not talk about legalization during the primary and leave himself the option of being for it in a general election. And so obviously I think that's fair to the electorate. And it's not the first time. I mean, there are multiple issues in which he's tried to do these sorts of things. For example, when the free trade agreement was up, he wrote an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal. He wrote it with Paul Ryan. And just 3 days later, he flipped on it after, I don't know why, he got some pressure on the Fast Track Authority. He's done it on votes on farm issues. In fact, changed his vote on the floor of the Senate. So there's always some of that because new facts are presented. But I think my concern is that voters need to, if you're going to attack someone on a policy issue, you need to be clear about where you stand on the issue and where you've stood in the past.
Here's how Politico framed what they say your campaign is trying to do with Ted Cruz. They say, quote, that you're trying to paint the Texan as a craven insider who lacks authenticity. Is that what you're trying to do with these charges?
Well, I didn't raise the issue. He's the one that attacked me on it. And after I basically stated what I would do and what I've done in the past and what I would do in the future as president, he attacked me. And I simply pointed out that he, too, supported legalization. And up until the night of the debate, had never said he would rule it out. And even at the debate, said he didn't intend to. So I'll let voters make their judgment about what people are doing. But what I don't think is fair is his strategy of being for legalization but not admitting it during the primary, and then in the general election embracing it as an effort to win votes. I don't think that is fair to voters.
So when voters are making their decision on this, should they be thinking about what does Ted Cruz think about immigration, or should they be making a larger question, what is Ted Cruz being honest with?
Well, I think when you spend your whole time telling people that you're a clear talker and you say what you mean and everyone else is a sellout but you're the only purist, I think it's fair to say, well, hold on a second. I mean, here's where you've been in the past on some issues, and here's where you are now. The truth is everyone running on the Republican side supports strong conservative positions. We have some differences on some issues, and we should discuss those, like national security, for example. But when you run by telling everybody you're the only purist in the field, you're the only one that's always consistent conservative, well, I think then your record is going to have a light shown on it, and in this case has proven that, in fact, well after the immigration debate had ended, he was still talking about how he was open to legalizing people and how important it was to bring people out of the shadows and so forth.
He says, Senator Cruz's position, for the 11 million or more undocumented workers is he says he wants to enforce the law and basically remove them from the country by doing that. Is that a workable plan, do you think, to get all those who are here?
Well, yeah, for criminals, they'll have to be deported. People that have violated our laws will have to be deported. I don't think you're going to round up and deport 12 million people, and I don't think this country would tolerate or support that. And so my argument is pretty straightforward. We're going to deal with the people that are in this country in a reasonable but responsible way. But we're not going to be able to do anything until we enforce our immigration laws better. In essence, until we bring illegal immigration under control, not just pass a law that's enforcement, but actually put enforcement in place. Actually have E-Verify in place and working. Actually have the visa overstay prevention entry-exit tracking system in place. Actually have the southern border security strategy with the 700 miles of wall and fencing and the 20,000 additional border agents. Have all of that in place and prove to people it's working. And then you deal with the people that are here illegally. That's the only way forward.
And deal with them. Where are you on citizenship in terms of when dealing with those people?
Well, what I've argued is if you've been in this country for, at this point it should be 12 years, because 10 years was the number 2 years ago. If you've been in this country for 12 years, have not otherwise violated our laws, meaning you can pass a background check, you learn English, or have to be in the process of learning English, or have learned it, you pay a fine, a significant fine, because you violated the law. You start paying taxes, meaning you have to be employed, you don't qualify for any federal benefits, and you get a work permit. And that's all you're going to have for 10 years. After that 10-year period, I am personally open to allowing people to apply for a green card, but I know that that's not a majority position in my party. What I won't say is that here's what I don't think that we should say, that if we can't get agreement on the green card part of it, we shouldn't do anything at all. I think most of those people that are facing this situation would tell you having a work permit is better than having nothing at all. The Democrat position, the Hillary Clinton position, is either it has to be citizenship as fast and as easy as possible, or we do nothing at all and we keep beating you up over it in the elections. That is not a reasonable position.
Let me ask you a broader question about your record on immigration. There was a time in America when a new senator, if they came in and jumped in the middle of a tough issue, forged a compromise, that would be something to boast about, that would be something that they would run on. Yeah. You are being, and were in the last debate, attacked by several different people, but now Ted Cruz is running an ad about the Gang of Eight, yeah, and trying to tie you to Chuck Schumer, a Democrat. In your party, instead of running on it, it's a liability to have tried to do this.
Well, I tried to solve a problem. Florida is deeply impacted by this issue. The majority of people that are in Florida illegally came legally. They overstayed a visa. So Florida, our hospitals, our schools, our economy is really carrying a heavy burden. And my fundamental promise to the people of Florida was that I would go to Washington, stand up to Barack Obama's agenda, but also offer an alternative, not just be the opposition, be the alternative. I saw an opportunity in 2013 to try to make a difference, to take an important issue and influence it in a better direction, fully understanding the Democrats were in charge of the Senate. And so we would have to have some product of compromise to get it out of the Senate, in the hopes that a more conservative House would take it up and make it even better, and then a united Republican Party would present it to the president and say, here's our approach to immigration, this is the only way forward. It didn't work out that way. And I think part of what we learned in that process is you're not going to be able to do this comprehensively. You're going to have to do it in a number of stages. I even before getting involved in that effort, expressed skepticism at a comprehensive approach. We tried it. It doesn't work.
Do you think you're being punished, though, for trying to form compromise?
No. Look, 2013 was a different time, and a lot has happened in the last 2 years. I think people opposed the bill, and as a result are angry at anyone who was around it. Some people are anyways. But I just tried to make a difference on an important issue, and I tried to influence it. I tried to do the best we could, given the fact that certain people were in charge at the time. If we were doing it now with a Republican majority, we would have to compromise a lot less, and it could go a lot more in the direction I wanted it to go.
If Ted Cruz frames this as a fight between who's going to be tougher on illegal immigrants, is he going to win that fight?
I don't think that's what the fight should be about, because it's not just about being tougher on illegal immigrants rhetorically. It's about doing something that actually works. You can be tougher against illegal immigration, but you got to deal with the problem you have in place now. And the problem you have in place is a significant one. And I think what Americans would say is, we know we have to deal with some of the people that are already here, but we're only prepared to do something about it if this never happens again. And that is why the enforcement part is so important. And enforcement has to happen first, and it has to be in place. Otherwise, you won't be able to do the other parts.
You had another discussion with Senator Cruz about surveillance and the vote he took and national security. When Chris Christie heard that back and forth, he said it was a meaningless debate. Why is that debate you were having with Senator Cruz not meaningless?
Well, it is not meaningless. It's one of the most important issues that confronts our country.
Why?
And our next president will have to deal with it, because we face, in radical jihadists, for example, an incredibly sophisticated group in ISIS, who has a clear understanding of how we collect intelligence, both as a result of the disclosures made by a traitor named Edward Snowden, and also because some of the other things that have gone out there in the debate on this issue. They are well aware of how we collect intelligence, and they have taken concrete steps, not just ISIS, but foreign states as well, and other terrorist elements, to avoid detection. And so we need to stay ahead of the curve. If we want to learn about these attacks and disrupt these plots, we are in a position where we need to be adding tools to our toolbox, not taking out tools. And in the process of doing that, this new act passed and took away a valuable tool. And not only should we be adding to it, not only should we not be getting rid of old tools, we should be adding new ones as the threat emerges.
The metadata tools you were talking about that were taken away, those were all in place for the period that the San Bernardino killers were plotting. Right. So, I mean, they weren't effective in that case. Isn't the problem, I mean, so taking them away now doesn't seem like it would have affected.
Well, first of all, there's 5 years of collected data that is going to be deleted now. They're going to be erased, and we would love to have
2 years.
Well, instead of 2 years, but there were 5 that were in the previous period that are there, and they're going to be destroyed given this new law that passed. It would be great to be able to see who this individual was calling over the last 5 years. The argument that it didn't prevent one attack or another attack would be like saying, let's stop collecting fingerprints because burglars nowadays wear gloves. I mean, you want to have as much information as possible. You never know when a key piece of information is part of a larger puzzle that allows you to disrupt plots and find people. And I can tell you that the metadata program was one of the recommendations that people have had after 9/11. And if you look at one of the judge's rulings that found the program to be legal, he wrote that had that program been in place, we would have found one of the hijackers who was calling the safe house in Yemen. So the program does have utility, and those who say it doesn't, they're not being honest about it.
How much of a national security issue do you think it is that there is now an open conversation in the Republican Party about banning Muslims from America, and that a majority of the party agrees with that idea? Right now, do you think that's a national security problem?
Well, the statements that people have made, it's not a serious policy proposal. And so it was made for the purposes of recapturing the headlines. I mean, Donald Trump had fallen out of the headlines, rightfully, because we had the largest terrorist attack in American history since 9/11. He wanted to get back in the headlines, and he came up with something spectacular and outrageous so that people would respond to it and he could recapture the headlines. It's not a serious proposal. Ultimately, I think that all of this will pass, and it will be the rhetoric and the policies of the next president that will determine whether we are safer or not.
Because I was interested, Chairman Burr, Senate Intelligence Chairman, said it actually does have a real danger right now. It can be used as a recruitment tool from terrorists, and also what do Muslims feel like who live in the United States, that it might alienate them, which, as you know, is the precursor for potential
Well, ISIS, the primary recruitment tool that ISIS uses is that they are recruiting people to join their apocalyptic cause that's going to have this final showdown in the city of Dabiq against the West, and it's going to trigger this new era in world history. The second point is a valid one. We will need cooperation and work alongside the Americans, Muslim Americans in this country to identify areas where people are being radicalized or things they may see in their community. We are going to need to work with them, and most certainly there are very patriotic Muslim Americans who love this country and would love to share information with us to prevent these attacks. And so to the extent that rhetoric could prevent people from doing that or make them resistant to cooperating with law enforcement and intelligence agencies, that's problematic, of course.
Another debate you had with Senator Cruz on foreign policy was overseas. He said, quote, "We need to focus on killing bad guys, not getting stuck in Middle Eastern civil wars that don't keep America safe." What do you make of that critique?
Well, he's wrong, because civil wars in the Middle East have a direct impact on America. Take Syria for an example. The Syrian civil war was not started by the United States. It was started by the Syrian people themselves, particularly Sunnis, who wanted to remove Assad. My argument was, this thing is going to spiral out of control. If we don't empower the secular rebels on the ground, they're going to be killed, or they're going to be forced into exile, and a vacuum will be left, and it will be filled by radical jihadists, because that's who fills vacuums in the Middle East. Well, that's precisely what's happened. And the argument that Assad and we have no vested interest and he's not an enemy of America is wrong. For example, Assad is the reason why there's a refugee crisis. Why are there hundreds of thousands of refugees destabilizing Europe, tens of thousands trying to come to America? Because Assad is conducting an attack of sectarian cleansing. He is conducting a program of getting rid of all the Sunnis, and that is forcing hundreds of thousands of people to destabilize Europe and Jordan and trying to come into the United States. Assad is the single largest conduit to Hezbollah. He is the one that helps Hezbollah get access to 50,000 rockets, which they'll use to rain down on Israel. Assad is the one that created a transit point for the IEDs that Iran was providing rebels or insurgents in Iraq to maim and kill Americans. As long as Assad is in power, you're going to have a vacuum, and that vacuum is going to be the breeding ground for other jihadists, if not ISIS, al-Nusra, or some other group.
But people are so afraid of, you take Assad out, then we're committed to having to take care of what's left afterward, because when we don't, it creates the kind of failed state.
Well, we're not going to take Assad out. The Syrian people are going to take Assad out, and I think the lesson of Libya is, if there is a civil war that's leading to this sort of vacuum, you want it to end as quickly as possible. The longer it lasts, the harder it's going to be to govern that country afterwards. That was the case in Libya. It became a protracted conflict. We didn't start it, the Libyans did. And my argument was, if this civil war takes too long, you're going to have arms flowing into Libya, independent militias rising. Who's going to disarm them and who's going to govern afterwards? And of course, that's where the phrase lead from behind came from.
But the Powell rule, you break it, you bought it. Even if the Syrians are the ones who overthrow Assad, we're helping them, and by that little bit of help we give, puts us on the hook. Also, afterwards, if it's a failed state, the United States is on the hook.
But our involvement wouldn't have exacerbated the uncertainty. Without America firing a single bullet or providing a single weapon, there was going to be a civil war in Syria that was going to destabilize Syria and create a vacuum. And so our choice was, let it play out. If you let it play out, it leads to the vacuum, which leads to these ISIS fighters, or do you do something to end it as quickly as possible so that vacuum isn't created? And that's the choice we had 3 years ago, and we didn't take it under this president.
Does this question of intervention versus non-intervention represent a fundamental and big misunderstanding about the way the world works, or is this a debate in which reasonable people can disagree, given how complicated it's been to intervene in these countries?
Well, I think there's a valid debate to have. We shouldn't intervene in every conflict. There are conflicts all over the world, and America shouldn't be involved in every single one of them. But when it comes to the Middle East, in particular countries such as these, that are prime operating spaces for radical jihadists to fill if a vacuum is created, I think it's important to have an in-depth debate. It's not as simple as they try to make it sound. Well, there's this dictator, he's a bad guy, but at least he wasn't a radical jihadist. Well, that's not actually true in the case of Assad. He was empowering radical Shia terrorists, and in fact had cooperated with al-Qaeda in some instances against America's interests in the world. But it goes back to the point that I made earlier. If you let it play out, as these guys argue that we do, as Senator Cruz and others are arguing, all you would have had is what you have now, which is that vacuum that led to ISIS coming in.
Let me ask a couple of political questions. You have a new ad that's running, and in the ad it says, quote, "All of us who feel out of place in our own country." Do you feel out of place in your own country?
I think people feel out of place in their own country for a number of reasons. Economically, we're in a country where you were told your whole life that if you go to school and you get a degree, you're guaranteed the American dream, or at least a shot at the American dream, and that's not happening. You have a country where people are told this is a country where you're going to be judged on your merits and on your hard work, and that's not happening. Increasingly, Americans feel out of place because it seems like the people who have access to power and influence win, and everybody else is left on the outside looking in. And then people that hold traditional values are often described as bigots and haters.
Who calls them that?
Oh my gosh, everybody on the left does. For example, if you do not support their definition of marriage.
But I mean, the word bigots and haters,
Absolutely.
everybody, so you're the president? Who's calling them that?
Well, more certainly the president has on occasion said that people that don't support same-sex marriage are wrong. But in terms
But wrong is different than
well,
bigot.
but in the broader left, I've been called a bigot for not supporting the definition of marriage.
But is this somebody on Twitter saying this, or somebody
No,
real?
you want me to give you names? I'm more
Well-
than happy to provide them to you. I mean, virtually every liberal group says that about anyone who doesn't support their agenda when it comes, for example, to the definition of marriage. On that issue, I've said, look, I support the definition of marriage as the traditional definition. It doesn't make me a bigot, or it's just my opinion on what it should be and the law that I support. And if you want to change that law, go to your state legislature and change it, not the Supreme Court. But basically, anyone who has a different interpretation, many groups on the left will label you a bigot or hater. And oftentimes, by the way, I have had pastors, for example, appear at my events, and you'll see the blog posts from some of the groups that are in favor of a different definition of marriage saying he has invited an anti-gay pastor to his event. That's not true.
When you say, though, the us who feel out of place, are you including yourself in that ad?
When it comes on the traditional values, absolutely. I have been called that before. In fact, this very week, I was called anti-Hispanic, anti-Latino by a group of, I don't know, obviously people from the left, funded from the left, who argue that unless we agree with them on everything, somehow we've betrayed our community. I mean, this is standard operating practice from the left.
I was in Iowa reporting this week and talked to some folks who would be in the kind of considered the mainstream part of the party, and you are their hope. Is being the hope of the establishment, is that a liability in this campaign right now?
Well, I always chuckle when the people say you're the establishment, because first of all, the establishment didn't want me to run for Senate. And they did everything possible so that I wouldn't win that race. Then the establishment didn't want me to run for president because it wasn't my turn, and I wasn't the next person in line. Third, I would say if I was the establishment, I would have raised a lot more than $6 million in the third quarter of this year. But here's the fourth point. If someone like me, with one of the most conservative voting records in the Senate, who has consistently opposed initiatives of the leadership of my own party, if I am now the establishment candidate as some claim, then that means the grassroots have taken over the establishment. That means the conservative movement has taken over the establishment. That's what that would mean. Ultimately, I do want to unify the Republican Party. I think we need to have every voter that has voted for us in the past vote for us again, but we also need to attract new people, and we can do it by applying our conservative principles to the real-life challenges of real people in the 21st century.
Vladimir Putin says Donald Trump is a, quote, outstanding and talented personality.
No.
Is that an endorsement you want?
No, I don't. I don't want Vladimir. Vladimir Putin is a wily, cost-benefit analysis political actor who is trying to have Russia recognized as a great global power on par with the United States, and who wants the world to return to a sphere of influence system of politics. In essence, he carves out spheres of influence. he's now arguing not just former Soviet republics, but former Warsaw Pact countries. We all have to ask his permission before we engage them economically, militarily, or culturally. We're not going to accept that. We shouldn't accept that. And that's the source of our conflict with Vladimir Putin. And I think it will take a strong commitment on behalf of the next president to ensure that Vladimir Putin, or whoever the next leader of Russia is, understands we want good relations with the Russian people. Russia's an important country in the world, but we are not going to agree to a foreign policy in which they control countries around them as if they were satellites.
Donald Trump seemed to be honored by the praise from Putin.
He shouldn't be. Vladimir Putin is a person he's jailed and murdered journalists, political opponents. He bombed an apartment building as a pretext to attack the Chechens. He is responsible for the downing of that Malaysian airliner over Ukraine because he provided the anti-aircraft weaponry that was used for that. So this is a person who's done some horrifying things on the global stage. From a geopolitical, realistic level, we have to deal with him, but because he's the leader of an important country that, between them and us, control over 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. But he is not someone who is going to go down in history as a great leader.
And Donald Trump, when mentioned those journalist killings, he said, well, I think our country does plenty of killing also.
Well, I haven't heard him make that statement. If he did, of course, it's outrageous. I don't know of a single documented instance in which the President of the United States has ever ordered the assassination of journalists who issue bad coverage of them or who have taken a different political line. We've entered a portion of this politics where nothing surprises me anymore, whether it's from Donald or some of the people watching.
Senator Rand Paul has called for your resignation because you've missed so many votes in the Senate. What's your response?
Look, I'm running for president, and when there are instances, of course, we do our job every day. Even before I got on the air with you today, we were going through some constituent service work where I'm personally intervening on behalf of people in our office. When there are important votes, especially those where I can be a decisive voice, I'm going to be there. But I'm also running for president because I want these votes to matter again. Look at this omnibus vote that just happened in Washington. This massive, grotesque piece of legislation. That's the kind of thing that shouldn't be happening. And if there were presidential leadership, it wouldn't be happening. And when I'm president, it won't. So that's why I'm out campaigning, because I want these votes to start to matter again. I want the work in Washington to be productive on behalf of the American people. That will require me to be away for some time while I'm campaigning, but I intend to win this race, so these votes will matter again.
The pushback would be, if it's such a big and important deal and such a gargantuan abuse, this omnibus bill, why not go back there and say it in your...
Well, in essence, not voting for it is a vote against it, although my position on it is clear, because they needed my vote to get it passed, to get the 60 votes because of the Senate rules. But here's the other point about Senator Paul, and I don't want to engage him too much because he's got his own style about him, but he's the only person running that likes politics so much. He's running for 2 offices at the same time. I mean, he wants to be a senator and president. I'm not running for re-election to the Senate because I want to be president. I want to ensure that these votes that are being taken in the next Congress actually matter. They actually have a chance of happening, so we can turn this country around and begin a new American century.
That's great, Senator. Thank you so much.
Thank you.